From Victor getting his throat slit open, to Gus getting his face blown apart. These are the most shocking deaths in Breaking Bad. Starting with Jane Margolis. Jane Margolis was a recovering drug addict and a tattoo artist who rented Jesse Pinkman a duplex apartment. Jesse met her while desperately looking for a place to stay, and their first interactions were awkward. Jane showed him around the unit while Jesse nervously tried to talk to her. Over time, however, the two grew close.
So hey, I got this kick-ass new flat screen. Wanna see?
Small moments like sitting together and watching TV slowly turned into something more. For Jesse, Jane became a source of comfort and stability, someone who actually listened to him and treated him like a person instead of a problem. But after Jesse's friend Combo was killed, everything changed. Jane had been sober for 18 months, but when Jesse started falling apart, she tried to help him cope and ended up introducing him to heroin. In doing so, she started using again as well.
On your back, baby, in case you throw up. On your side. Sleep on your side.
As their addiction deepened, Jesse told Jane about his meth business with Walt and the money he was owed. When Walter refused to pay, Jane stepped in and blackmailed him, threatening to expose his secret.
This is blackmail, because what I know about you, high school teacher turned drug dealer with a brother-in-law in the DEA, that'd make one hell of a story. National news, I'll bet.
Walt eventually gave them the money, and for the first time in a while, Jesse felt like he finally had a way out. With the cash secured, Jesse and Jane planned to leave Albuquerque together and start over in New Zealand, a lovely place, but before going, they decided to use heroin one last time. Later that night, Walt went into Jesse's apartment and found both Jesse and Jane unconscious from heroin use.
Jesse.
Walt tried to wake him up, and as he did, Jane accidentally rolled over onto her back and started choking. Walter instinctively rushed over towards her, reaching out to help, but then he stopped. He stood there, watching as she choked to death right in front of him. Walt's eyes, they filled with tears as he stood over her, fully aware of what he had just allowed to happen. The next morning, Jesse woke up and found Jane dead beside him.
Come on!
Mike later arrived to clean up the scene and slapped him in the face, but nothing could undo what had already happened. Hank Schrader. Hank Schrader was a DEA agent and Walter White's brother-in-law who had spent years chasing a drug kingpin without realizing the man he was hunting was living inside of his own family. By the time season 5 rolled around, Walt had stopped cooking meth. The problems that once followed him seemed to fade away, and his life settled into something that looked normal again. Skyler was back with him, the money was hidden away, and the danger felt far off. To everyone around them, it seemed like the worst was finally behind them. That same weekend, the Whites and the Schraders came together at Walt's house for a casual family gathering. But since Hank ate way too much, he excused himself to use the bathroom. Sitting there, he looked around for something to read and picked up a copy of Leaves of Grass. When he opened it, a handwritten note caught his eye.
What do you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White?
You got me.
Hank froze. He took the book, left without a word, and had a panic attack on the way back as the truth settled in. Later on, he teamed up with Jesse and built a trap using Walt's buried money as bait. But when Walt saw a car approaching in the desert, he called Jack to come save him.
You want me around to cook for you? You get here right now. You got it. As fast as you can.
But when Walt saw that it was Hank and Gomi, he told Jack to cancel the plan. With no other options, it was Jover, so Walt walked towards Hank, who cuffed him and finally said the words he'd waited years to say.
Walter White, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
It looked like Walter was finally going to be arrested, but only seconds later, Jack and his guys showed up, and everything fell apart. The tense standoff quickly turned into gunfire, and Gomi was killed almost immediately, unceremoniously. In the confusion, Hank was shot in the leg and left unable to get away. Walt begged for Hank's life and even offered every dollar he had, but Hank already understood how it was going to end.
You're the smartest guy I ever met. You're too stupid to see. He made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
And dropped one of my favorite lines in the entire series.
Do what you're gonna do.
Jack shot Hank in the head, and Walt collapsed beside him, screaming as the reality hit. Moments later, Jack's crew buried Hank and Gomez in the same hole meant for Walt's money, erasing them as if they were just another loose end. Gus Fring. To the outside world, Gus Fring was a calm, polite fast food executive dork running Los Pollos Hermanos like any other restaurant chain. But behind that image, he had built a drug empire that surpassed even the Mexican cartel. By season 4, Walt's behavior became harder to manage, and Gus no longer saw him as reliable. That's when Gus shifted his attention to Jesse. He gave Jesse responsibility, treated him with respect, and slowly built up his confidence, making him really feel like he mattered. As Jesse began to trust Gus more, the gap between him and Walt widened. Once Gus knew that Jesse could continue without Walter White, Gus removed him from the operation, ordered him to stay away from the laundry, and made it clear that Jesse was no longer his partner.
I will kill your wife. I will kill your son. I will kill your infant daughter.
Walt's first instinct was to disappear because he's just a little diva sometimes, but he contacted the vacuum repairman and tried to disappear. But when Skylar revealed that she had given almost all of their money to Ted, running was no longer an option.
You gave our money to Pennick.
Walt, please just hear me out, please.
With nowhere left to go, Walt was forced to think directly. Instead of fleeing, he went to Hector Salamanca and proposed a plan. Walt convinced Hector to visit the DEA, knowing it would make Gus believe that Hector had snitched.
So, Mr. Salamanca, you got something you want to tell me?
And when Gus found out, he went to the nursing home with Tyrus to deal with it personally. Gus sat across from Hector, mocking him for going to the DEA and reminding him of how powerless he had become.
A crippled little rata. What a reputation to leave behind. Is that how you want to be remembered?
Hector refused to look at him. And this is a small little detail because Hector knew Gus would read through his eyes. But then, slowly, Hector turned his head and locked eyes with Gus as he began slamming the bell in his wheelchair again and again and again. At first, it seemed like another outburst of Hector, but Gus suddenly understood what was happening. But before there was any time to move, the bomb hidden beneath Hector's wheelchair detonated, killing Hector and Tyrus instantly. For a brief moment, Gus stepped out, straightening his tie as if nothing had happened. But as the camera shifted, it revealed that half of his face was gone and collapsed to the floor, dead. One of the most iconic scenes in all of television and one of the most powerful figures in the series was gone in seconds, ending an empire that had seemed untouchable. Gale Boetticher. Gale Boetticher was a highly educated chemist hired by Gustavo Fring with a last name that I cannot spell to help set up an underground meth lab and serve as Walt's assistant. He held a master's degree in organic chemistry and had a strong passion for the artistry of chemistry itself. Gale was the one who convinced Gus to hire Walter after analyzing a sample of Walt's 99% pure blue meth, impressed by its quality.
Hi, Gale Boetticher.
Hi. You're my new lab assistant, I take it.
But everything shifted the day Walt ran over two of Gus's dealers to save Jesse. That incident showed just how unpredictable and dangerous Walt was and how he had become, making Gus realize he needed Gale to take over if anything went wrong. He visited Gale at his apartment and told him that while Walt would continue cooking for now, Gale needed to learn every detail of the process so that one day he could take over.
If push came to shove, I was wondering how soon you might be able to take over the lab yourself.
The next day in the lab, Gale began asking Walt question after question about his cancer and his personal life and his social security number, making Walt realize that once Gale was ready to work on his own, he would replace him entirely. That night, Walt and Jesse made a plan. Jess would find Gale's apartment, and Walt would finish the job.
Please tell me you found him.
6353 Juan Tabo Boulevard, apartment 6.
As Walt left his home to visit Gale, Victor suddenly pulled up and told him about a chemical leak at the lab.
Problem. Some kind of chemical leaking in your lab. You gotta come with me.
When they arrived, Walt saw Mike and immediately understood he was in danger. Mike and Victor drew their guns and Walt pleaded for his life. But when he realized Mike wasn't going to fall for it, he offered to give up Jesse.
I'll give you Jesse Pinkman. He's in town, all right? He's not in Virginia or wherever the hell you're looking for him. He's right here in Albuquerque, and I can take you to him. I'll take you right to him.
Walt explained he didn't know Jesse's exact whereabouts and had to call him to arrange the meeting.
Listen to me. You're closer than we are. I have about a 20-minute lead. They've got me at the laundry, and they're going to kill me. Jesse, do it now!
Mike quickly seized the phone, and in that moment, both men realized what was about to happen. Victor left to intercept Jesse while Mike tried to warn Gale. Meanwhile, Gale was at home, relaxing with music playing and a kettle whistling on the stove. As the phone vibrated on the table, Gale didn't hear a thing and poured himself a cup of tea, unaware of the warning he was missing. Then there was a knock on the door, and when Gale answered, Jesse was standing there with a gun pointed at his face. At first, Gale thought it was a simple robbery. He tried to reason with Jesse, offering him money and valuables, but it became clear that nothing could save him.
Please, don't do this. You don't have to do this.
Jesse reluctantly fired the gun, and Gale fell lifeless to the floor, all because he was in Walt's way. Victor. Victor was one of Gus Fring's most trusted men, quietly overseeing the super lab and keeping the operation running smoothly. But after Jesse killed Gale, Victor ran to Gale's apartment to check for himself, and some witnesses even saw his face. Back at the lab, Walt and Jesse were held captive, unsure of what Gus would do to them. Walt pleaded with Mike, insisting they needed to cook to keep the operation on schedule.
Come on, Mike. Let us cook.
But Victor stepped forward, confidently switching on the lab equipment and began to cook himself, which was insane. Then Gus entered the lab, and Daddy wasn't happy. And that look alone made it clear that Walt and Jesse weren't walking out of the lab alive, as Victor smiled, trying to get noticed by Gus. Walt started shouting at Victor, thinking it might convince Gus to let them live since he still needed a proper cook to run the lab.
You're not flipping hamburgers here, pal. What happens when you get a bad barrel of precursor? How would you even know it?
When Gus silently changed into a hazmat suit and picked up the box cutter, Walt started saying whatever he could think of to stay alive.
You kill me, you have nothing. You kill Jesse, you don't have me.
But Gus stood right next to Victor, and without a word, he grabbed him by the throat and slit his neck open. Victor gasped and clawed at Gus, but it was meaningless. Even Mike instinctively drew his gun, shocked at the brutal execution. Do you know what it takes to scare Mike? Blood, it pooled across the lab floor as Walt gagged and Jesse stared in horror, unable to process what was happening. Gus stepped over Victor's body, removed his hazmat suit, and calmly ordered Walt and Jesse to get back to work.
Well, get back to work.
Don Eladio. Don Eladio Fuente, yes, that is his full title name, was the head of the Mexican cartel, a man who lived openly as if nothing could touch him. When we first see him, he's relaxed and comfortable hosting parties at his estate, lounging by the pool with a drink in his hand and guards posted everywhere. By season 4, the cartel began pressuring Gus Fring for the secret behind the blue meth. They began hijacking his trucks and targeting his men, making it obvious that he had no choice but to cooperate. So, to lure Eladio into a trap, Gus pretended to agree and offered a compromise.
Word has come down that they want me to go to Mexico.
Jesse was taken to the cartel's super lab and forced to cook under their supervision. Despite being nervous and completely out of his element, he managed to produce meth with a purity of 96.2%. That's my boy Jesse right there. And while it wasn't as pure as Walter's, it was more than enough for the cartel.
Yeah? What's that mean? You're staying. You belong to the cartel now.
Shortly after, Gus arrived at Don Eladio's estate with Mike and Jesse. He presented Jesse as the solution to their problem and brought a rare bottle of tequila, the Zafiro Añejo, as a gift. But before anyone else drank, Eladio insisted that Gus go first to prove the tequila wasn't poisoned and that Gus was really down to party. So, without hesitation, Gus raised the glass and swallowed the drink.
Salud.
Eladio and his men joined in after Gus took the first sip, unaware of what was about to happen. A moment later, Gus calmly excused himself and walked inside. In the bathroom, he leaned over the sink and forced himself to vomit, puking out the poison from his system. As he was cleaning up, one by one, cartel members started collapsing around the pool. Don Eladio's smile faded as he realized what was happening. He stumbled, struggling to stay on his feet, looking around as his men dropped around him. Eventually, he lost his balance and fell into the pool while Gus stood nearby and watched as the cartel leadership died right in front of him.
Don Eladio está muerto!
In a matter of moments, the most powerful figures in the Mexican cartel were gone, and the man who once seemed untouchable was left floating in silence as everything he controlled disappeared with him. Tuco Salamanca. Tuco Salamanca was the first major cartel figure Walter and Jesse ever dealt with, and from the moment he entered the story, everything became louder and more dangerous. Their first encounter with Tuco made that clear immediately. Jesse showed up expecting a simple exchange, but instead, he was brutally beaten, left bloodied on the floor while everyone else stood by in silence. Jesse gets beat up all the time. When Walt confronted Tuco later himself, he used fulminated mercury disguised as meth, detonating it inside of Tuco's office and blowing the place apart with only a small piece of it.
You got one part of that wrong. This is not meth.
Tuco paid Walt on the spot and immediately asked for more meth, turning what should have been the end of the deal into the start of something much, much more beautiful. Really, just more worse, actually. Walt and Jesse knew they had to get away from him, though. But before they could, Tuco kidnapped them and dragged them out to his Uncle Hector's house in the desert, where he finally laid out his plan.
I came up with this great idea. Mexico.
Mexico.
We'll set you up in a super lab. We'll do nothing but cook 24/7. And no federales are gonna mess with us because I got my people there.
Tuco wanted to introduce them to his cousins and force them to cook meth for the Salamanca family. Desperate to escape, Walt tried to poison Tuco with ricin in his food, but Hector noticed and began ringing his bell violently, drawing Tuco's attention. And the moment Tuco understood what Walt had tried to do, he completely snapped. He dragged Jesse outside, savagely beat him, and was preparing to kill them both. There was no way out. Walt and Jesse were trapped, standing in the open with nowhere to hide and no one coming to save them. But somehow Jesse managed to smash a rock over Tuco's head and then shot him in the stomach.
We tried to poison you because you're an insane, degenerate piece of filth, and you deserve to die.
As Jesse was about to kill him, a car appeared.
Oh my God.
But it was Hank Schrader. As Walt and Jesse made a run for it, Hank, who had tracked Jesse's car, unknowingly walked straight into Tuco, who emerged from the desert with his gun drawn, and the two faced each other for a tense moment before gunfire erupted. Hank held his ground and managed to kill Tuco in the middle of the desert with a shot straight to the head. Just like that, the man who had terrorized everyone around him was gone in a sudden, chaotic shootout that neither side ever saw coming. Mike Ehrmantraut. Mike Ehrmantraut was a former Philadelphia police officer who moved over to Albuquerque after his son's death to be near his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter Kaylee. There, he became Gus Fring's head of security and the man who quietly solved problems that no one else could. But after Gustavo's death, Mike was forced into an uneasy partnership with the bald guy Walter and Jesse to keep the operation running. He insisted on paying hazard pay to 9 of Gus's imprisoned former employees to ensure their silence. But since the DEA was closing in, Walt wanted the 9 men to be eliminated entirely. When the DEA caught Mike's lawyer, he cooperated, putting Mike's name directly on the radar. Mike was sitting at a park with his granddaughter Kaylee when he realized he had no choice but to leave her behind and disappear.
Yeah, Mike, they're coming for you. Right now, they're coming.
Mike called Saul Goodman to deliver a go bag containing cash, a gun, a passport, but Walt insisted on delivering the bag himself.
Mike, tell me where to get this bag.
They met at a riverbank where Walt refused to hand over the money unless Mike gave him the names of the 9 imprisoned men. Mike refused, holding to his code of loyalty, and grabbed the bag before turning to leave.
You're welcome.
That's when Mike paused and let out everything he had been holding in this whole time.
We had a good thing, you stupid son of a bitch. We had Fring. We had a lab. We had everything we needed. It all ran like clockwork. It was perfect. But no, you just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego.
Mike got into his car, ready to leave and start a new life, but as he checked his bag, he noticed his revolver was missing. At that moment, Walt appeared and fired through the window, hitting Mike in the stomach. Mike drove only a short distance before crashing near the riverbank. He stumbled out and sat on a log, watching the water, knowing the end had come for him. Walt followed him and started regretting what he had just done, since he could have simply gotten the names from Lydia, but Mike stopped him and said, one of the smartest and most competent people in this series was killed in an instant because Walt couldn't control his pride or his ego. Todd Alquist. Todd Alquist first appeared as a quiet and pretty polite person who blended seamlessly into Walt and Jesse's mobile meth operation, but it didn't take long for everyone to realize how evil and creepy he really is. After the desert shootout where Hank and Gomez were killed, Walt revealed that Jesse was hiding under the car and asked Jack to kill him. Todd, however, suggested keeping Jesse alive.
I bet we could get it out of him back home. I mean, I could do it.
And later forcing Jesse to cook meth for the gang. When Jesse wasn't cooking, he was locked in a pit, chained and beaten while constantly being monitored by Todd. After months in hiding, Walt finally returned to Albuquerque and realized Jesse was still alive and was being forced to cook for Jack's gang. The next day, he showed up at the cafe where Lydia and Todd were meeting and asked Todd to set up a meeting with Jack.
I think Jack should hear this.
I can come up there tonight and talk to him. He'd get it. This is a win-win situation.
Walt had also purchased an M60 machine gun and rigged it with a car battery and a garage door open monitor, creating a remotely activated gun turret to fit in the trunk of his car, like a badass. After parking strategically at the compound, Walt provoked Jack until he ordered Todd to bring in Jesse.
Him being alive is not him and me being partners. Not by a damn sight. What, you think I'd partner with a rat? Where's that little piece of shit?
He's finishing up a batch.
Well, go get him, bring him here.
When Jesse was brought in, Walt tackled him to the ground and activated the M60 turret hidden in the trunk.
Todd, get him off, would you?
As the bullets tore through the walls, Jack's men were slaughtered in seconds. In the chaos, Jesse finally had a chance to take revenge, and he wrapped the chain around Todd's neck, forcing it tight with every ounce of rage he had built up over months of imprisonment, torture, and humiliation.
Mr. White.
Todd struggled, but Jesse didn't let go until it was over, and his lifeless body collapsed. Max Arciniega. Max Arciniega grew up poor in Chile, spending his early life in the Santiago slums with very little to his name, and that's where he met Gustavo Fring, and the two quickly formed a close bond. Gus, he saw his talent and paid for his education in chemistry, and from that point on, the two worked as a pair. Max focused on the product, perfecting the math, while Gus handled the business and presentation. Together, they built up Los Pollos Hermanos as a front, quietly planning something much bigger. But they wanted to move beyond small distribution and partner directly with the cartel, replacing cocaine with a cheaper, more addictive product. To get noticed, Gus gave away free samples of Max's meth to cartel operatives, hoping it would attract Don Eladio's attention. After weeks of silence, Don Eladio finally agreed to meet them in person, bringing Gus and Max to his compound to hear what they had to say. When Eladio arrived, he appeared relaxed at first, but he quickly cut through the small talk and demanded to know what else they were offering besides the chicken at their restaurants. When Max kept talking about food, Eladio asked why his men had returned from Gus's restaurant with meth instead of just food, making it clear he expected something more valuable than chicken. Gus explained how he gave them samples so he could introduce Eladio to the product, but when Eladio called meth a useless business idea, Max started explaining how addictive the product was, how inexpensive it was to produce, and how much money he could bring in if it was handled correctly. Gus then stepped in after Max was explaining why meth could eventually replace cocaine. But the more Gus spoke, the clearer it became that Don Eladio was taking it as disrespect. For a brief moment, Eladio appeared almost intrigued by what he was hearing. But then Eladio turned to Max and asked Max why Gus was needed if Max was the one who understood the chemistry. And the mood shifted immediately, and Gus sensed something was wrong. He tried to backtrack, he tried to apologize, attempting to calm the situation before it went any further. Before Gus could finish apologizing, Max stepped in to defend him. He explained to Eladio that Gus had no intention of offending him, emphasizing how close they were and how much he trusted and respected Gus. Max urged Eladio to look over the disrespect and tried to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control, but before Gus could finish apologizing, a gunshot rang out. He flinched as something hit his face, and for a brief moment, he didn't understand what had happened. Then he saw Hector Salamanca lowering the gun and Max tipping out of his chair. Max's body hit the ground beside the pool with a bullet through his head. It took a second for reality to catch up to him, but when it did, he lunged forward towards Hector. Juan Bolsa grabbed Gus and slammed him to the ground, pinning him beside Max's body. Hector pressed his foot onto the back of Gus's head, forcing him to face towards Max's lifeless body. The cousins, Marco and Leonel Salamanca. Marco and Leonel Salamanca were cousins of Tuco Salamanca, and the kind of killers you don't see coming until it's too late. After learning of Tuco's death, they wanted revenge. The cousins showed up at Walt's house and were ready to kill him, but just moments before Walt got out of the shower, a message from Gus Fring stopped them. Since Walt was still valuable to Gustavo, he asked them to postpone their attack until his business with Walt was finished.
No tengo ningún problema con sus dehesas. Estoy involucrado con este señor. Hasta entonces, lo necesito vivo.
But the cousins, impatient with waiting, began showing up at Gus's restaurant to intimidate him.
Let you add this to your living schedule.
Eventually, Gus redirected the cousins towards Hank Schrader, the DEA agent who had killed Tuco. And when Hank was sitting in his car, his phone rang.
You have 1 minute.
When Hank looked in his rearview mirror, he saw one of them approaching with a rifle while the other was carrying his signature axe. Hank slammed his car into Leonel, crushing his legs and spine between vehicles and sending his gun flying into Hank's car, while Marco fired relentlessly, tearing into Hank's SUV.
Termínalo.
As Marco approached with the silver axe to finish him off, Hank found a single bullet on the ground. He loaded it, trembling with his hands, and just moments before Marco could swing his axe, Hank pulled the trigger, blowing Leonel's head clean off. Leonel survived the initial attack and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition alongside Hank, but Gus wanted to finish the job and distracted everyone with yummy delicious chicken, while Mike slipped into Leonel's room and killed him with a lethal injection.
4. Give me a liter of saline wide open.
I can't get a pulse back.
4. 1, 2, 3.
By the time the doctors figured out what was happening, Marco was already gone. Spooge. Spooge, my man, was a meth addict and a small-time criminal, leaving with his equally addicted girlfriend. They had robbed Skinny Pete at knife point, taking his meth and cash, which eventually led Jesse to track him down. When he arrived, the crib was a disaster. Garbage and toys were scattered across the room, and their 2-year-old child was locked in a room. Eventually, Spooge and his girlfriend returned home, and Jesse held them at gunpoint, demanding they pay him back. They agreed to pay him back, but the only problem was that the money was inside of a stolen ATM, and they had to open it first. Jesse even took the moment to yell at the mother for how she treated her poor child.
What the hell kind of mother are you?
For a brief moment, things seemed to calm down. The shouting stopped, and the young kid quietly stepped out of the room, asking Jesse if he wanted to play. As his attention shifted, Spooge's girlfriend rushed from behind and knocked him unconscious. When Jesse finally gained conscious, he heard the sound of drilling. He looked up and saw Spooge under the ATM trying to bust it open while his girlfriend begged him for meth. Spooge ignored her completely, and their argument escalated when he called her a skank, which only made her angrier. As she stood next to the ATM, Jesse's heart raced as the tension grew between them, and he realized the situation was about to take a turn for the worse. Without warning, she shoved the ATM from her side, and the heavy machine came crashing down on Spooge's head. His body twitched once, then went completely still, and blood spread across the floor beneath the machine. His girlfriend didn't even care about the life she just took and started digging through his pockets for meth. After taking a hit, she was ready to pass out on the couch like nothing had happened. Jesse was left frozen, understandably so, staring at Spooge's lifeless corpse, unable to speak, stunned by the sudden, brutal end. And guys, that's the end of the video. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out another video and press some buttons, the buttons that all the YouTubers ask you to press. But thanks for watching. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.